They sold my house while I was still living in it. Not after I died. Not when I was too far gone to notice. While I was still waking up in that same bedroom, still making tea on that same stove, still sitting in the armchair where my wife Margaret used to read to me on Sunday evenings. They signed the papers, pocketed the money, and decided I didn't need to know. I'm Arthur Bennett. I'm 86 years old. I spent 31 years working on the railways, got up before dawn every single day, came home with grease under my fingernails, and enough pride in my chest to fill that house twice over. Margaret and I raised 3 children inside those walls. We buried a dog in the back garden. We painted the kitchen 4 times because she could never quite settle on the right shade of yellow. I don't say this to make you feel sorry for me. I say it so you understand what it means to have something taken from you. Not stolen in the night, but taken in plain daylight by the people who called you Dad. If you've ever felt invisible inside your own family, or watched the people you love most look right through you as though you were already gone, stay with me. This story is for you. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe. Drop your city or country in the comments. It means more than you know. Margaret passed 4 years ago. Breast cancer, swift and merciless. We had 47 years together, and I still reach for her hand sometimes when I wake in the night. After she was gone, the house changed in a way I can't fully describe. Not empty exactly, but muffled, like someone had pressed a cloth over everything. The rooms that once echoed with noise went quiet. The kitchen where she'd hum while cooking smelled only of whatever I'd managed to heat from a tin. I kept going. That's what you do. My children, David, Patricia, and young Robert, though Robert is 51 now and hardly young, began visiting more often after Margaret passed. I told myself it was grief bringing them back. Families pull together when they lose someone. David would come on Saturdays, sit in the good chair, drink my tea, ask the same 3 questions about my health, and leave inside of an hour. Patricia would bring food I hadn't asked for, and rearrange things in my kitchen while talking at me rather than to me. Robert sent money once or twice and called it love. I accepted all of it. I was grateful even. An old man alone takes warmth wherever it's offered. What I didn't see, what I was too willing to not see, was that the visits weren't about me. They were about the house. It's a modest place, 3 bedrooms, a proper garden, a garage I'd converted into a workshop, and attached to the side, the shed. The shed is important, remember that. Margaret and I bought the house in 1979. I paid the last mortgage installment myself, in person, at the Building Society, and shook the clerk's hand like I'd just been knighted. We owned it entirely. In a town like ours, that means something. In a family like mine, it meant something different. The shed is where I kept my tools, not fancy ones, working tools. The kind with calluses worn into the handles because those calluses came from my palms. I had my father's level in there, still accurate, still true. I had the chisels I used to build Margaret's wardrobe the winter Robert was born. I had a tin biscuit box where she'd leave me notes, little folded papers she'd slip into my coat pocket in the morning, so I'd find them at the end of a shift. I kept every one of them. 40 years of folded notes on the second shelf behind the jar of wood screws. That shed was not a storage space. It was the last room in the world where I still felt entirely like myself. I signed things I shouldn't have signed. That's the hard truth, and I won't dress it up. My eyesight has been going for 2 years, macular degeneration, and I can no longer make out fine print without my magnifying glass, which I frequently misplace. David started bringing documents with him on his Saturday visits, explaining them quickly in that particular tone he uses with me now, the slow, careful voice people use with children and old dogs. He'd say things like, "It's just a formality, Dad," or, "This helps us manage things for you." I trusted him. He was my son. You trust your children. That's not weakness. That's just how it's supposed to work. I don't know precisely when I stopped being a man with a home and became a man with a problem they needed to solve. But somewhere in those visits, those documents, those quick, patient explanations, it happened. The day I found out was a Tuesday in November. Cold, gray, the kind of morning where the light never quite arrives. I was looking for my council tax reminder, and instead pulled out a document I didn't recognize. It had official header paper, my name on it, Arthur James Bennett, printed in full, a completion date, a sale price, £247,000. I sat down on the floor, not because I fainted or fell. I simply sat down, the way you do when the world reorganizes itself so completely that standing seems beside the point. I read it again. I read it a third time, holding the page so close to my face that my breath fogged the paper. The address was mine. The property description was mine. The signature at the bottom, it was mine too, though I had no memory of signing anything that said what this said. I found 3 more documents in the same drawer, a second signature page for the workshop conversion, a separate listing for the shed as a supplementary structure, and a letter addressed to David from an estate agent, thanking him for his cooperation and confirming vacant possession had been agreed for the 14th of February, Valentine's Day. My children had arranged for me to be vacant by Valentine's Day. I put the documents back exactly as I'd found them. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat in my armchair and I looked out through the window at the garden, at the frost on the grass, at the shed door with the small brass handle Margaret had chosen from a catalog in 1986 because she said it looked like something from a proper house. And I made a decision so quietly, it barely felt like a decision at all. I would say nothing. Not yet. Not one word. What I felt in that moment was not what you might expect. There was grief, yes, and beneath the grief something harder, a fury so clean and cold it was almost clarifying. But above all that, there was something else, certainty. I had been underestimated my entire life by foremen who thought a quiet man was a slow one, by supervisors who mistook steadiness for stupidity, now by my own children, who looked at their 86-year-old father with his failing eyesight and his misplaced magnifying glass, and decided he was already gone. They made the oldest mistake in the world. They confused silence with ignorance. They confused age with absence. I had spent 31 years on the railways. I knew how to read a schedule. I knew how to wait on a platform. I knew the train always arrives. The only variable is whether you're in the right place when it does. I started paying attention differently. Not the distracted half-presence of an old man watching hours pass, but the focused, deliberate attention of someone who knows exactly what they're looking for. The way David's eyes moved to the walls and ceiling when he walked in, calculating. The way Patricia had started referring to my possessions in the past tense. "You always loved that cabinet, didn't you?" As though she were already curating a memory of me. The way Robert, on his one visit that autumn, had spent 20 minutes in the shed without being asked, and come back inside smelling of sawdust and saying nothing about it. I noticed the phone calls they thought I couldn't hear. The walls in an old house carry sound in peculiar ways, and I knew every creak and channel in those walls. I heard David tell someone the arrangement was nearly finalized. I heard Patricia say they should get the conversation done before Christmas, so I had time to adjust. Adjust. As though I were a piece of furniture being repositioned to suit the new layout. I visited my solicitor on a Wednesday morning when none of my children were expected, walking the 12 minutes to the high street at my own pace, without telling a soul. Her name is Mrs. Elaine Cartwright, and she has handled my affairs for 11 years. I brought the documents in a brown envelope. I laid them on her desk. I watched her face as she read. She looked up after a long moment and said, quite carefully, that there were several things here that concerned her. I told her I agreed. I told her I wanted to understand exactly what had been signed and exactly what my options were. And then I told her one more thing. I told her I did not want any of this to move quickly. I wanted it to move correctly. What followed was the strangest period of my life. On the surface, nothing changed. David came on Saturdays. Patricia brought food. Robert sent a card for my birthday. I made tea, asked after the grandchildren, watched the television, went to bed. I was, to all appearances, the same old man, slightly hard of hearing, slightly forgetful, grateful for the company. I gave them nothing to worry about, no reason to accelerate their plan. Mrs. Cartwright had made several important discoveries. 2 of the documents I had signed had been witnessed by David himself, which created a significant legal problem for the transaction. The sale agreement included the shed as a separate structure, but the shed had not been included in the original deeds as a saleable asset. It had been registered under a different classification, attached to a planning permission still in my name alone, which could not be transferred without my explicit, informed consent. My eyesight might be failing. The law's eyesight was not. The 3rd discovery was perhaps the most useful. Mrs. Cartwright had quietly contacted a colleague at the land registry, and through that conversation, it emerged that the sale had not yet been fully registered. The paperwork was in process. The money had not yet moved. We were still, just barely, in time. I also did something else, something quieter and more personal. I called my neighbor, Jeff Marsden. Jeff is 73, a retired postman, and he has lived next door to me for 22 years. We are not the sort of men who share feelings over the garden fence, but we are the sort of men who know each other's characters completely. I told him, over tea, what had happened. All of it. I watched his face go through disbelief, anger, and then a quiet, focused sort of disgust that I recognized because I felt it too. I asked if he would be willing in the coming weeks to be observant, to notice who came and went, to remember what he saw. He said he would. He said considerably more than that, but the important word was yes. I also wrote letters, real letters, in my handwriting, posted from the box on the corner. One to my old railway union, where I still held honorary membership. One to the Citizens Advice Bureau in the next town. One to a journalist on the local paper who had written a piece the previous year about care home fraud, which I had read with more interest than I knew at the time. I did not make accusations. I simply described my situation, accurately and calmly, and asked whether anyone might be able to advise me or take an interest. Christmas came. We had it at David's house, which was new. We had always gathered at mine. I noted this without commenting. The dinner was pleasant in the way things are pleasant when everyone is performing pleasantness. Patricia had brought a photo album full of old pictures of Margaret and me, which made the grandchildren smile and made me understand that I was already being remembered in the way the living remember the safely gone. I ate well. I thanked everyone. I kissed the grandchildren goodbye. On the drive home, David insisted on driving me, another new development. He told me that he and Patricia and Robert had been thinking about my situation. He used the word situation. He said there was a very good facility not far away, very modern, staff who really understood older people's needs. They'd already been to look at it. He thought I'd be comfortable there. I looked out the window at the dark road and I said, "That sounds like something to think about." He patted my arm. He was satisfied. 3 weeks later, Mrs. Cartwright filed a formal challenge on the grounds of undue influence, lack of informed consent, and a procedural error in the witnessing of the documents. By Friday morning, the estate agent had received notice. By Friday afternoon, David had called me 4 times. I did not answer. I was in the garden, raking leaves, which is something I have always found deeply satisfying. He came to the house on Saturday. His face was a color I hadn't seen since he was a teenager caught in a lie. He sat in the good chair and told me there had been a misunderstanding. The documents were for my protection. They were only trying to help. I watched him talk, and I thought about that Tuesday morning in November, sitting on the floor with a piece of paper in my hands. I thought about the shed, the biscuit tin on the second shelf, Margaret's notes, folded small so they'd fit in a coat pocket. I let him finish. Then I said quite pleasantly, "I know exactly what was signed, David. I know exactly what it says. And I know exactly who Mrs. Cartwright is." The silence that followed was one of the finest I have ever heard. The legal process took several months. The transfer was reversed. The sale was voided. The estate agent, who had been less than scrupulous in verifying the vendor was fully informed and acting freely, faced a formal complaint. David and Patricia received letters from Mrs. Cartwright that I understand were not comfortable reading. Robert, to his credit, rang me and apologized. It was a short call and not an easy one for either of us, but he meant it. The local paper ran a small piece, not front page, but there. An older gentleman, the headline said, who had discovered a property transfer he had not knowingly authorized. The journalist was careful and fair. She did not name my children. She didn't need to. In a town this size, everyone knew within a fortnight. What I did not get back was the relationship I thought I had. That was the hardest part. And I want to be honest about it. I do not have Sunday dinners with my children now. I do not receive the performed kindness or the careful questions. The house is quieter than ever. Some evenings I sit in the armchair and the silence presses in, and I am aware of being an old man alone. I will not pretend otherwise. But here is what I did get back, and it matters more than I can properly say. I got back the shed. I walked in there the day the legal process concluded, and stood in the smell of old wood and oil and metal. The biscuit tin was still on the second shelf, behind the jar of wood screws. I took it down. I opened it. All the notes were still there, 40 years of them, small and folded, Margaret's handwriting on each one. Some I know by heart, some I hadn't opened in decades. I sat on the old stool with the tin in my lap and read them one by one, slowly, in the cold afternoon light. I did not feel old or powerless or invisible. I felt exactly like myself. I got back my authority, not the kind you demand or perform, the quiet kind that comes from knowing who you are and acting accordingly. I am Arthur Bennett. I worked hard. I loved well. I paid every debt I ever owed. I built things with my own hands that still stand. And when my children tried to make me into someone who could be moved around and managed and filed away, I simply didn't allow it. There was no drama, just a man, the facts, and a solicitor who knew her business. Jeff still comes round on Thursdays. We drink tea and argue about football and complain about the winter. He never mentions what happened except once when he said, "You handled that well, Arthur." I told him I'd had a good teacher. He asked who. I said, 31 years of early mornings. If there is something I want you to take from this, it is not about property law or legal challenges. What I want you to understand is this: growing old is not the same as becoming less. I know what the world says about old age, that it is a narrowing, a diminishing, a slow handover of all the things you were. And there is truth in that. My body is not what it was. My eyes betray me. I move through the world more carefully now, more slowly. But the things that made me capable of fighting this, patience, observation, silence, the long knowledge of people and their motives, those did not diminish with age. They accumulated. Every difficult morning, every loss survived. Every year I showed up and did the work even when it was hard. All of that became something. A weight that held me steady when the ground tried to shift. They looked at me and saw someone past the point of consequence. That is the mistake they will live with. I live with the quiet. I have made my peace with it. Margaret always said I was better at silence than any man she'd known. She meant it as a complaint on evenings I wasn't talking enough, and it became, in the end, the most useful thing about me. Now let me ask you something, and I want you to think about it honestly. If you discovered tomorrow that the people closest to you had made decisions about your life without asking, what would you do? Would you confront them? Would you fold? Or would you do what I did, go very quiet and very still, and let the truth do what it always does when you give it enough time and enough space? Think carefully. The answer says more about you than about them.